We were in Austin for a long weekend. Family dinner, they called it. Reunion. Celebration. All those soft names we give to things that usually end in regret. Amy booked the place under her name, but it was my card that covered the 4-bedroom rental, the outdoor patio with the fire pit, the catering trays we never opened because Beth insisted family should cook. I said nothing. I rarely did when it came to her side of the family. Silence was cheaper than starting a fight you already knew you'd lose. The house was modern, white-walled, all clean lines and false warmth. It reminded me of a hospital dressed like a home. We filled it with forced laughter and the clink of wine glasses. Amy's parents arrived just before sundown, dragging polite smiles behind their rolling luggage. Her father hugged me, too long, too tight, the way older men do when they want to pretend things are fine. And then Beth came, with Dylan. I could smell the cologne before I saw the car. Black Mercedes coupe. Leased, I'd bet my left lung. He stepped out like he was arriving at a press event. Blazer crisp, loafers spotless, hair sculpted by a man who charged more than I paid for tires. He carried a bottle of scotch like a trophy. "Thought you boys might want to taste the good stuff," he said, winking. The bottle was unopened when the night ended. Dinner was at 7. I grilled steaks because Amy asked me to. I stood at the grill alone, sweating into the smoke, while Dylan circled behind me with a drink in one hand, pretending he knew the difference between marbling and fat. "Charcoal? Brave choice," he said, sipping. "You know gas is more reliable, more efficient." I said nothing. "It's fine," he added. "Not everyone can master the subtleties of heat." He walked off before I could respond. Not that I would have. Men like Dylan don't listen for answers, only silences. We sat around a long rented table draped in white. Amy's mother said grace, hands trembling over a bowl of salad she didn't make. Amy smiled thinly, her hands folded in her lap like they were tied there. Her father complimented the grill. Beth complimented Dylan's blazer. Dylan complimented himself. "Closed a deal on a duplex in South Congress," he said. "Off-market. Friend owed me a favor." He smiled, sharp and gleaming. "You've got to have the right connections, you know?" No one asked what he meant. No one ever did. Dylan floated on assumption, on the greasy confidence of a man who'd never had to earn silence with labor. He bragged like breathing, effortless, constant, self-sustaining. I ate slowly. I always do at these things. One bite, chew, swallow, smile when spoken to. Repeat. You learn to conserve energy when you're the only man at the table without a voice. Halfway through the meal, Dylan turned toward me. His voice lowered, but not enough. "So, tell me, what is it exactly you do again?" He dragged out the word exactly like he was trying to stretch it over a wound. "I work logistics," I said. "Oh? For a company?" I nodded. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what trucks? Warehousing? Scheduling? Freight consolidation? Route optimization?" "Ah," he said, as if I'd confirmed his suspicions. "So you make sure other people's stuff gets from A to B." I nodded again. "That's noble." Amy looked down. Her knife scratched against the plate. Beth covered her mouth like she was coughing, but her shoulders shook with the first signs of laughter. Dylan leaned back in his chair, smiling. "You know, it's impressive, really, just how useless some men can be. No offense." The laughter burst before the words finished settling. It was small at first, Beth's nasal little snort, and then it spread like a bad smell. Amy's father chuckled softly, like he didn't want to but couldn't stop. Even her mother smiled into her wine glass. The only one who didn't laugh was Amy. She turned toward Dylan, her voice low but sharp. "Just be quiet for once." He shrugged. "Just saying what everyone's thinking." That was the part that stuck with me. Everyone's thinking. I looked around the table and no one corrected him. No one leaned forward to say, "That's not true." No one told him to shut his mouth, or to show some respect in a house he hadn't paid for, at a dinner he hadn't lifted a finger to prepare. Not even Amy. She didn't meet my eyes. She picked up her fork, stabbed a piece of asparagus, and chewed like nothing had happened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, watching the man who mocked me refill his glass and settle in deeper, like the world owed him comfort. Beth shifted the conversation to their upcoming ski trip, Vail or maybe Aspen, depending on how Dylan's schedule lined up. "We'll see," he said. "Depends how some of my positions perform next quarter." Then he winked again, like money was a joke only he understood. Amy's father asked what he was investing in. That opened the floodgates. Real estate, crypto, private equity. A startup he was advising. He name-dropped cities, fund managers, CEOs. He used acronyms no one understood and didn't explain them. He quoted returns and margins and unrealized gains, like he was reading off scripture. He talked for 30 minutes straight. The steak on my plate turned cold. My hands didn't move. I just listened. Listened as he hinted I was living off the family. That men like me needed women like Amy to stay afloat. That real men made moves, not excuses. No one stopped him. Amy's father nodded. Her mother beamed. Beth swelled with pride. Amy said nothing. And that was when it happened, the moment something inside me broke, clean and silent. Not rage. Not even humiliation. Something colder. Something final. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't speak. Didn't draw attention to it. Just unlocked the screen with my thumb and started typing. Dylan didn't notice. He was too busy telling a story about the time he accidentally outbid a hedge fund for a foreclosed property. Beth laughed so hard she spilled wine on the tablecloth. No one cared. Amy glanced at me once. Her eyes caught the light and then dropped. I sent 3 messages. One short call. Confirmed a few figures. A transaction date. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and picked up my fork. Dylan was still talking. But the clock had started ticking. Dylan talked like a man convinced the air itself was lucky to carry his voice. After the wine, he switched to that bottle of scotch he'd brought. The one still sealed when dinner began. He cracked it open like it was the last act of a performance he had been rehearsing for years. He poured it himself. 3 fingers. No ice. A statement. Then he toasted himself. To those of us who create value, not just move boxes from one warehouse to another. Amy's mother actually clapped. I stared at the rim of my glass and didn't blink. Amy still hadn't looked at me. Her silence had become a kind of armor, one that shielded her from taking a side. But not taking a side is still a choice. And I was watching her make it. Dylan launched into another story, this time about an old client who tried to sue him over a licensing agreement. "Silly bastard didn't read the fine print," he said. "We settled, of course. He walked away with 10 grand. I walked away with the rights to a platform now valued at 7 figures. He swirled his drink. People don't read. They react. And that's where the money is. In other people's ignorance. Beth beamed at him like he was a god. Her hand slid across his thigh under the table, and his smirk widened like he knew he was untouchable. But I had already made the call. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to gloat. All I had to do was wait. 25 minutes after I hung up, Dylan's phone, the one he'd been checking every few minutes to flash his portfolio alerts, buzzed once. Then again. Then it rang. He glanced at it. His brow twitched, just barely. But I saw it. The tiniest fracture in a man built entirely from self-satisfaction. He silenced the call and kept talking. Anyway, once the licensing was squared away, the next step was buzz, buzz. He fumbled the glass, caught it, laughed it off. Beth giggled nervously. "Someone wants your attention." "Spam," he said. It rang again, and then he answered. His voice was casual at first, confident, but the tone shifted so fast I could feel the heat drop out of the room. "Wait, what do you mean flagged?" The table went still. "Hold on. No, that account is private. I moved the assets last. What? No, that's impossible. That fund is... No, it's fully vested. It's not exposed. Who told you that?" Beth reached for his arm. "Dylan." He waved her off, stood, and walked toward the kitchen, still on the phone. His voice dropped to a whisper, but nothing in this house was soundproof. We could all hear the panic boiling under his words. No, no, listen. That capital isn't mine. It's... Look, the LP's signed off. It's on paper. We have disclosures. I have the docs. I can send them. Pause. What do you mean, notarized copy? He paced in tight circles. His other hand, the one not holding the phone, tapped against his thigh like a metronome. Amy's father furrowed his brow. Beth looked like a wax figure mid-smile. Amy finally looked at me. That's when it started to fall apart. The voice on the other end, whoever it was, kept going. Dylan's posture shifted. He stopped pacing, stopped tapping. He stood completely still, and for the first time that night, the smile was gone. He hung up without a word. His hands shook as he reached for the scotch. He poured too much, spilled some. Nobody said a word. When he sat back down, his face was pale, his jaw tight. His hands stayed under the table, clenched in his lap. Beth leaned in. What's going on? He didn't answer. Amy's father cleared his throat. Dylan? Still nothing. Then he looked at me, just for a second. And in that second I saw it, the recognition. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew who. And more than that, he knew I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't made a scene, hadn't drawn a single drop of attention. I had just made a call. That was all it took. The smirk was gone. The arrogance drained. What happened? Beth asked again, this time more forceful. He looked at her parents, at Amy, then back at me. Nothing, he said, but he was sweating. He stood up, left the room again. This time we heard the kitchen drawer open. The sound of him fumbling with utensils, as if the normalcy of clinking metal could cover the growing dread in his voice. Another call, this one short, 30 seconds. Then the front door opened and closed. We sat in silence, forks idle, wine glasses untouched. Amy stared at the empty chair, then at me. What did you do? She whispered. My voice was calm. I did what he told me to do. Amy's mother spoke. He didn't. He said I was useless. I cut in. So I got out of the way. And now the people he lied to are seeing what he's really worth. No one spoke after that. Even Beth had stopped blinking. Her nails dug into her thighs under the table, knuckles white. Amy's father leaned forward. What kind of call did you make? I didn't answer him. I looked at Amy. She looked like she wanted to speak, but no words came, because she already knew. Dylan had been playing with other people's money. Family trusts, pooled assets, unfiled transfers that wouldn't survive a second glance from compliance. He'd gotten away with it for years. Sleight of hand, charm, just enough technicality to keep it legal, just long enough. But that fund, the one he bragged about, that money came from Beth's father. It was supposed to be parked, not touched, not leveraged. He used it anyway, and now that money was gone, or rather frozen, because the inquiry had started. The SEC wasn't loud when they moved. They were deliberate, focused, and one call from the right person with the right documents was all it took to accelerate the wheels. I didn't leak anything. I didn't fabricate a single fact. I didn't need to. I just told the truth to someone who was already watching. The call had simply confirmed what they suspected. But now they had a timestamp, and they were moving. Amy's father stood up, his face tight with something between confusion and fear. Are you saying? I'm saying, I interrupted. You've trusted the wrong man with your money, and your daughter. That was the first time Beth looked at me like she saw me, really saw me. Amy's mother stood up too, hovering like a candle about to go out. He wouldn't do anything criminal. Not Dylan. But the words rang hollow, because she already knew. They all did. They just didn't want to admit it. Not after years of letting him charm their dinners and laugh at their son-in-law in plain sight. Amy whispered again. You didn't have to do this. No, I said. But I did. Her eyes narrowed. You planned this. No, I said again. But I was ready for it. She turned away. She didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Beth left soon after. Phone clutched like a lifeline. Still trying to call a man who had vanished mid-scotch. Her heels clicked down the driveway like metronome ticks on a countdown she couldn't stop. Amy's parents stayed, but the room had lost its air. Every movement felt staged, every word forced. They offered me coffee. I declined. They offered to help clean. I let them. Amy sat outside on the back porch, staring at the dark, her wine glass untouched. And I cleared the plates, every one of them, even Dylan's. The scotch still sat in his glass. 3 fingers now warm. I poured it down the sink. The house never recovered its sound. After Dylan walked out, after the calls stopped ringing and the wine went untouched, the silence didn't feel peaceful. Felt exposed, like drywall ripped open to show the wiring underneath. Amy's parents left just after midnight. No hugs this time. No long handshakes. Her father avoided my eyes. Her mother squeezed Amy's shoulders and whispered something that sounded like prayer but felt like fear. Beth didn't return. She sent a single text to Amy. He says it's a misunderstanding. Nothing more. Amy and I were alone in the rental. She stood at the kitchen island while I loaded the dishwasher. Plate by plate, fork by fork, the rhythm steadied me. Control in small movements. You humiliated him, she said finally. I didn't look at her. He humiliated himself. You made a call. Yes. Her jaw tightened. You set him up. I closed the dishwasher gently. Too gently. No. I confirmed what already existed. She let out a slow breath. You could have just ignored him. I turned then, met her eyes. And you could have defended me. That landed. I saw it. She crossed her arms. Defensive. It was a joke. It wasn't. You're being dramatic. No, I said evenly. I'm being finished. That word lingered between us. Finished. She stared at me like she was trying to locate the man she married. The version who swallowed insults at holidays. The version who smiled through condescension. The version who absorbed impact so she wouldn't have to. You've changed, she whispered. No, I said again. You're just seeing me. She looked away first. That's when I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to admit for years. Dylan wasn't the problem. He was a symptom. The real fracture wasn't at the dinner table. It had been growing quietly in the spaces where Amy chose silence over loyalty. Every time her sister mocked my job. Every time her parents compared me to men with louder titles. Every time someone implied I was lucky to be included. She never corrected them. She never stood beside me. She stood adjacent. And adjacency isn't marriage. You enjoyed it, she said suddenly, voice low. Watching him panic. I considered that. No, I answered honestly. I felt nothing. That was worse. Her face shifted. Anger giving way to something uncertain. You scared me tonight. Good. The word surprised even me. But it was true. I've been small in this family for years, I continued. Tonight I wasn't. You destroyed Beth's life. No, I said calmly. Dylan did. She shook her head, pacing now. This isn't how adults handle things. No, I agreed. Adults usually tolerate disrespect quietly. I stopped. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. Another message from Beth. Her face drained. What? I asked. They froze everything, she said faintly. His accounts. Her name was on one of them. I didn't respond. She swallowed. Dad transferred retirement money into that fund last year. There it was. The real crack. Not pride. Not ego. Money. Security. Trust. And suddenly I understood why no one defended me at that table. Dylan wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a financial hope. A ladder. An upgrade. And I was the safe, steady alternative. Predictable. Replaceable. Amy looked at me slowly. You knew, she said. I suspected. And you still. Yes. Her voice hardened. You could have told us privately. I stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just enough. And would you have believed me? She didn't answer. Because she wouldn't have. You chose him tonight, I said quietly. When he called me useless. I told him to be quiet. That's not the same as standing up. Silence again. Outside, a car passed on the street, life continuing somewhere else. Amy's eyes glistened now, but I couldn't tell if it was anger or fear. What happens now? She asked. The simplest question. I walked past her into the bedroom, opened the closet, pulled out my suitcase. She followed me slowly. What are you doing? I'm leaving. For the night. For good. The words were calm, clean, like paperwork being signed. She stared at the suitcase like it was a foreign object. You're overreacting. No, you can't just walk out because someone insulted you. I'm not leaving because of Dylan. Then why? I zipped the suitcase halfway and looked at her. I'm leaving because you let it happen. Her breath caught. You think this is about ego? I continued. It's not. It's about partnership. And I realize tonight I've been alone in this marriage for a long time. That's not true. It is. She stepped closer. We can fix this. I shook my head slowly. You don't fix something you don't believe is broken. Her shoulders sagged. You're really going to throw everything away? No, I said. I'm finally keeping something. What? Myself. That was when she cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears slipping down a face that had chosen neutrality too many times. You're being cruel, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but I won't be invisible anymore. I packed slowly, methodically, shirts folded, shoes placed carefully. No rushing, no shaking hands. She sat on the edge of the bed watching me dismantle a life. You won't even stay to see how this plays out? She asked. I already have. She didn't understand. So I explained. Your family will blame me. Dylan will spin a story. Maybe he'll recover. Maybe he won't. But none of that changes what happened at that table. None of it changes how easily you let me be diminished. She wiped her cheeks. You're not diminished. I was. The suitcase closed. I carried it to the door. Amy followed me to the driveway. The Austin air was warm, heavy, thick with unfinished conversations. You're really leaving, she said, voice hollow. Yes. For Denver. Yes. You already planned this. I booked the flight after dessert. Her face tightened. You were going to leave even before the call. No, I corrected. I decided when you stayed quiet. That hurt her more than anything else. I opened the car door. She grabbed my arm. Please, she said. Just that. Please. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. The same hand that hadn't reached for mine when laughter filled the table. I loved you, I said quietly. Past tense. She let go. I got into the car. The engine started easily. As I pulled away, she stood in the driveway, small against the rental's white walls. I didn't look back again. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a man realizing he's been sitting at the wrong table. And choosing to stand up. I drove through the Austin dark with the windows down and the radio off. The night air was thick, but clean, the kind of air that feels different when you've decided something permanent. Every mile put distance between me and that house, and still, I could feel Amy standing there, smaller by the second, shrinking into a memory I didn't want to carry. I didn't go back to our apartment, didn't check in with friends. I went straight to the airport. I had booked the flight on my phone while Dylan was still wiping sweat from his brow in the kitchen. Seat 14F. Non-stop to Denver. Nothing but a carry-on and silence. When the plane lifted off, I felt it. Not relief. Not victory. Just weight leaving the body. Like something rotten had been cut away. Amy texted me at 2:03 a.m. Just after I landed. Please don't do this. I stared at the screen for a long time, then powered the phone off. In the weeks that followed, I heard everything secondhand. Dylan's name made the news. Not front page, not flashing sirens, but the kind of quiet headline that investors read with a dry mouth. Fund manager under review for breach of fiduciary conduct. One article said, alleged misappropriation. Another said, unverified investment transfers. But the core truth stayed the same. The money wasn't his. And now everyone knew it. Beth tried to do damage control. She claimed ignorance. Claimed Dylan had a team that handled the transfers. Claimed she was just supporting her partner's vision. But the accounts were in her name too. The fingerprints matched. And the feds don't care about feelings. Her father's retirement money, gone. Frozen in limbo, caught between asset seizure and the slow grind of civil litigation. I found out later that Dylan fled to Florida, stayed with a friend, told people he was building something new, but I knew what that meant. It meant he was hiding, buying time, pretending confidence while the walls closed in. And Amy? Amy called me exactly once, 10 days after I left. Her voice was tired, too tired for anger. He says it's all exaggerated, she said. That you tipped someone off. That you had it out for him. I stayed silent. Did you? Does it matter? I asked. I guess not. She paused. My dad's blaming Beth now. Says she roped him in. Says he only trusted Dylan because she vouched for him. He trusted him, I said, because everyone did. And because it was easier to believe in a golden boy than in the man actually doing the work. Silence. I didn't know, she whispered, about the money, about the fund, any of it. I believe you. Then why did you leave? I closed my eyes. Because you only spoke up when it was too late. Because you let them humiliate me in the open. And because when I needed a partner, you chose comfort. I didn't mean to, but you did. I could hear her breathing. I miss you. No, I said. You missed the version of me that stayed quiet. She didn't reply. I let the silence sit. Then I hung up. She didn't call again. Beth's world unraveled faster. The trust accounts she'd been living off were drained. Her condo, leased under Dylan's LLC, was repossessed when payments stopped. Her friends stopped inviting her to brunch. Her coworkers whispered. Even her social media vanished, as if shame needed a digital burial. I got a message from Amy's father 3 weeks after I left. Just a single sentence. What did you do? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to explain. I hadn't lied. I hadn't manipulated. I had simply stopped pretending. A month after that, a letter came to my Denver address. Amy's handwriting. 12 pages. She tried to explain how hard it had been, being stuck between her family and her husband. She wrote about the pressure, about appearances, about how she thought keeping the peace meant protecting the relationship. But protecting peace by tolerating disrespect is just another form of betrayal. She wrote, I thought you were strong enough to let it go. And that sentence stuck with me, because that was the heart of it, wasn't it? They didn't respect me. They expected me. Expected me to stay quiet. Expected me to pay. Expected me to show up without recognition, to take insults like furniture takes weight, without cracking. And when I didn't, suddenly I was the villain. Not Dylan with his stolen investments and fake smiles. Not Beth who co-signed the loans and defended the theft. Me for disrupting the illusion. But illusions only survive in silence. And I was done being silent. I never wrote back. In Denver, I started over. Rented a small apartment above a bookstore. Got a job managing operations for a logistics firm that didn't care what car I drove or what my title sounded like. The days were quiet, measured, honest. Sometimes, I'd walk through the city and pass families in cafes. Dads with strollers. Husbands bringing plates to the table. I'd wonder how many of them were just like me, invisible in their own homes, quietly despised by people who depended on them. I didn't date, didn't explain the past. I let it settle behind me like dust. One afternoon, I got another letter. This one from Beth. No envelope, just folded paper slid into my mailbox. She wrote, he's gone. Left the state. Probably for good. Then, I know you did it, and I hate you for it. Underneath that, scrawled like an afterthought. But I also know you were right. That was the closest thing to justice I ever got. Not a courtroom. Not a confession. Just that last line. In the end, no one came to apologize. No one returned what was taken. No one offered to repay the years of dignity I gave away for free. But I didn't need them to, because walking away from a table where you're mocked isn't weakness. It's clarity, because silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is complicity. And when you break it, when you finally draw the line, people call it cruelty, vindictiveness, ego. But they're wrong. It's self-respect, the kind that only rises after you've been trampled one too many times. So here's what I ask you. Was I wrong? Was I cruel to pull the mask off a liar? Was I selfish to leave a wife who chose comfort over truth? Or was I simply the first one at that table willing to live without illusion? You decide. But ask yourself this. If the man being mocked was you, and your wife said nothing, would you have stayed? Or would you have finally stood up, walked away, and let the silence do what words never could?